This is Pascal Zuta, angel investor, entrepreneur, and someone who started 15 companies and exited 9 with a total exit volume of $1 billion. Today, we're getting a rare look inside his world, a tour of his house in San Francisco, what makes the difference between founders who win and the ones who don't, and how playing the guitar and being creative is a killer advantage for founders. Pascal is not doing a lot of podcasts, and not every day you get to hear the story of how someone went from producing a film for Cannes Film Festival to being a gaming CEO to building multiple winning brands in e-commerce to then building a health tech company that raised $35 million in San Francisco. This is the crazy story of Pascal.
Let's see who's home. Let's see if someone is home. I was a bit too excited initially.
Hi guys.
What's up?
Viewers.
How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Very good.
Come
good
in.
to see you.
Hi.
Pascal, thank you. Thanks for also hosting it today with, at your place. We're excited to be here.
Thank you for making it out here.
Also, what I really love is that we can do it at your place today because you're not actively working in an office every day. You have the huge privilege of living a bit of a different life.
Don't tell my kids. I always try to pretend that I work hard, but I actually do not.
Probably a bit of hard work brought you to the point where you are today. For someone who has no idea who you are, what you've done in the past, can you just briefly outline the ballpark numbers of the companies you founded, the exits you made?
Sure. So I've started companies all my life. I've never done anything else. And I actually started as an artist more. I was a film producer in the beginning, and I was a nominee at the film festival in Cannes in 2004. And Quentin Tarantino watched my film. So that was kind of the start of it, but I never made any money with it, and that got frustrating quickly. And so I moved over, and I was experimenting with video actually really early on, and viral video in 2003, 2004. And so that brought me into social networks. So I started a social network, which completely didn't work. Then I had a video games company, which was a little bit more successful. And over the last 20 years, I've started 15 companies, and I sold 9. And I think that's a little bit special. So there's not many people who have sold that many. And so 2 of those exits were smaller, just a couple million. But 2 of them were also a couple hundred of million. And in between, I had all of the different things. And I had from social network or movie production to video games, cosmetics, fashion, AI, and healthcare. I went really, really broad. And so I think I've learned a thing or two about how to start these companies and how to scale them. And what I'm doing right now is basically that I only do that. So I'm on a couple of boards. I work with a couple of young founders, some of them which you know and some of them you don't. But that's what I do. So that's why my life is also a little bit more relaxed, because people normally don't really like to be on long calls with their board members, So I get my board calls with them, and I try to be a good mentor, and that's what I'm doing.
I'm excited to get into all of this. There's something so much, because what you mentioned is really true. It's very unique. I think this is a rare combination you see in the lifetime of an entrepreneur, to be in so many different spaces and have so many types of companies you create.
But they're all similar in the end.
And then we'll talk about that in just a bit. But let's maybe have a look around, show us around.
Sure. Day. So let's go outside. So where we're here is we're on the Larkspur Lagoon, and normally there's no boats in here, so this is unusual. What you see in here is Mount Tam, and Mount Tam is responsible for the special situation that we have here, because San Francisco is a foggy town, but Marin is not, and the reason is that the ocean is right behind that, and this big mountain just blocks the fog. So we are in a really, really sunny spot. We get 320 sunny days a year here. And we're on the water, so the kids jump in, and normally on a good warm weather day, there's 100 kids in here. Come in, I'll show you more.
3 kids, right?
I have 3 kids, yes, between 10 and 18 years old.
How did your entrepreneurship life or founder life change before and after kids?
Before and after kids?
Did it change?
So it didn't change enough, I think. When I started, or when my first child was born, I was 30, and I had started my 3rd company, and so a lot of the intensity that I went through in my life, because the things that you really have to work really hard, we all know that, right? There is nothing that will replace hard work, but that was really coinciding with the early years of my son's life. Yeah, it's a really, really hard thing to answer. On the one hand, you're saying hard work is really important. On the other hand, you say that family is really, really important. You want to satisfy both. That never works.
Gotta make a choice.
You got to make choices. Well, I think we've seen it all outside. We can just come inside if you want to, and just have a coffee and sit a little bit and chat.
Sounds amazing. Actually, I remember last time I was here, you showed me a very special side of you, which is also music and guitars.
Yes, we can go and look at some guitars.
Actually, I think it's a nice, fun fact around your life and also what you love. You wanna show?
Yeah, I'll show you the guitars.
I mean, the thing also I think we share a bit is, we both love building companies, products, the whole process of the entrepreneurial journey.
Yes.
But also I have such an artistic side of me. I also produce music. I really love this outlet and also see that it really helps me in building better products, you know, and living life more fully, more holistically and being in this creative state. But I feel like it's also a bit rare. A lot of founders and entrepreneurs are really just driven by the intellectual pursuit of, you know, one-sided in a way. And this is, I think, a uniqueness also we share in a way. Yeah.
And I think it's actually one that where a lot of success lives. You know, if you can both understand like the entrepreneurial business side, tech side, and the creative part, and you bring that together, that's a very unique skill. Not many people who understand that.
Someone is coming.
Yeah. So, okay. So my guitars, I have a lot of guitars. That's actually most of them. And this guitar was actually used to be owned by Bob Dylan. Isn't that cool?
The one and only. Yeah, it's crazy.
Hold it. You know what? Smell it. I think it smells like an old man and beer.
It's seen many places, I suppose.
It's seen many places, and it's actually from 1950, and he played it in 1990. And I think actually it sounds like Bob Dylan when you play it. It sounds like. Sounds like Bob Dylan.
Beautiful. We use this maybe in the intro as a small music piece, you know? That's cool.
I can play more if you want to.
Well, thanks for, you know, this nice detail. I think it's so cool to always see the unique elements that really define your life also in a way, right? And in your home. So it's quite cool. You got a lot of nerve. I say you should take things back a bit in time and go back to the time where you started your first company, because we have many young founders, builders who are watching these sort of videos we produce. Yeah. And they might be 17, 18, 19 years old and are in this point in their life where they decide, should I go to college? Should I just do something? I just want to pursue my passion. What was it like for you when you were in that age? How was the story for your first company? How did these details really feel to you? Were there difficult choices you had to make? Or were the struggles? Like, what were the really early days, the first encounters for you on that journey?
Yeah, well, the first company that I started was a film production company, and my father is a film producer. So it kind of came pretty natural to me just to do that during high school and start just, you know, producing first music videos for friends of mine who were making music like I was. And those were my first experiences. So I started to experiment a little bit with video, and I figured out at that time that you could actually send a video to someone and they would probably pass that on to a friend via email, and then you could track the email addresses, and they would send it on to more friends if the video was just good enough. And you would get more email address. And we're like, wow, this is actually cool. The better the video we produce, the more people will actually see it. So those were the first forms of virality. And that was so inspiring to me. And although that company never made much money, I was able to raise venture capital. And that was in 2005, so a long time ago. And at that time, 5 million euros was a lot of money. And I raised that money, and we went out and we built a social network. And the social network was basically built around that hypothesis that at some point, media will be consumed in social media. That was like a very visionary hypothesis at that time. But it turns out this is exactly what happened, right? And we figured out that we can't make it when we had burned 4. So we had 1 million in the bank. And our investors and us together, we said, this is not going to work. So we returned the money, and they gave me a job. They said, hey, why don't you just work for us? You did everything you could. We saw you worked really hard. You did it in a fair way. Didn't work out. That's fine. And they gave me a job, and that was the first time I came here, because that job was here. And we really enjoyed being here, and I really loved the life here. A lot of these things that we've done were just like super cool experiences. And that was the beginning of it. The next thing I did then was I actually didn't start that company. I was an early employee at a video games company. And that video games company was built around the hypothesis that at some point people will pay for virtual items in video games. Because at that time, if you wanted to play a video game, you would have to buy a €60, $60 box and install it on your PC. And we had seen in Asia how people were actually playing video games for free and just doing in-app purchases. That was before Farmville, before everything. And we were like, this is a really interesting business model, because in the end we can sell as many of them as we want to, because they're basically just entries in a database. And so that was a great experience for us. And the company became pretty successful. And it was the first time that it gave me a little bit of money, especially after we sold it to a large TV channel. to start playing a little bit more with it and taking a little bit more risk.
One thing I always think a lot about as I reflect on my journey is that by just doing things, you end up in very interesting places and are given very interesting opportunities. And it sounds like from your first venture led you to basically coming here to San Francisco, to Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
How is your take now as you have even more years of experience and I've seen this pattern maybe repeat again and again? Is this an advice that you would tell, a young founder out there saying, hey, just do things. This will probably put you in the nicest places and follow your unique curiosity. Is this something you would kind of put on a wall and say,
yeah,
that's how to live life?
Yeah, I think one of the wisest things you can say about business is, in business you only have to be right once, right? Be right once. If you're right enough, it's going to make you very successful, right? You can build a company around one thing that you do really well and one thing that you've probably done earlier than anybody else. So in business, you only have to be right once. In order to be right once, you have to do many different things. In my case, I guess, it took me a while and a couple of iterations until I had the first exit that was bigger. But once I had realized how it works, it kind of became a little bit of a formula. And the formula, obviously, many people say that revolves a little bit around the people, but it's not only that. A part of it is execution. But the other thing that I think is completely underestimated is timing. I think timing is everything. And I'm not sure if people in Berlin or so still talk about the Samba brothers, but here they are still a topic every now and then. It comes up when we Germans come here, because they were so blatantly stealing ideas. And then they always said, but ideas are worth nothing, which is true. I always say it's like when you go surfing and you go surfing on a day with no waves, you will have a really hard time. But you go surfing on a day with good waves, you're going to get to shore somehow. You go surfing on a day with a bad surfboard, but with big waves, you're going to get to the shore. It depends on the waves much more than on your surfboard. And that's what I'm telling everyone, that you got to find an idea that is right, and you can't know. You will have to will have to do 15 things before one really works.
I'd love to talk more about the patterns you saw across the 15 companies you've built and the formula you mentioned in even more detail. I think you work with so many founders and saw so many people also fail and succeed. I'm super excited about the differences, but say maybe we have a walk to a place you wanted to show us, and then we continue there.
Let's do that. I'm not sure how much you're tailoring this for European audiences versus American audiences, but we can just make a thing out of having that car drive us to the doing some self-driving.
Yes. Perfect. We're waiting for this all the time. We always see.
Really?
Waymo's driving by. We never were in one.
You never were in one? Take me to Paris on Magnolia, and it gives me no results from further. I knew that this would happen now. But
that's how these fancy AI tech demos also break down.
Take me to Paris. Okay, there you go.
Wow, that's actually an insane feeling, no?
So yeah, this has been a real big thing for me, because I don't like driving. I don't like driving. I'm not good at doing two things at the same time, and that involves just talking while I'm driving a car. And this is perfect. Okay, we're here.
Yeah. So as mentioned earlier, the thing that really stands out is that you started 15 companies, 9 of which you sold successfully, which means you work with a lot of people, a lot of young founders. You've seen a lot of things work and not work.
Yeah. And
you mentioned briefly this formula. And although, of course, every company probably takes a different path, there is a common denominator that you probably identified. So I would love to know even more about the things you've seen work versus not work in founders and companies in general, sort of the patterns that you can really take away and apply to how also you're thinking about now a new company that you might invest in or not invest in. So what is the lens that you're basically taking, the factors you're looking at?
Yeah. So I think obviously one thing is timing, as we said before, right? You want to see an idea that really feels like it's big enough and that there's something happening already that you have. A lot of people are really busy figuring out small ideas. It's really hard. Once I started a company, or helped to start a company that was selling yoga pants. That's a huge market. It's very easy to sell into a huge market that is already developed. You just got to do something a little bit different, but you'll still grab even a small piece of that market will be a big business. So that took me a while to understand. Not every business has to have something that is completely innovative and new. Sometimes it's enough to just do something in a field that already works and do it a little bit better. The other thing that for me is the big thing that holds all of the successes that I have had together, and actually also the companies where it wasn't so successful, is that I had developed this model where I always call it me being a co-pilot. And I think that was the best thing I've done in my career. And that was finding a young founder, sometimes not even that young, but somebody who's really willing to put in the extra hours, work super hard, be good at something, learn something, get really deep into it. And then having me on the side, being a little bit further apart and helping them to not lose track of what's really important. Having someone, when you're in the trenches as the CEO, having someone with a little bit more experience who spends a lot of time with you, helping you, guiding the way. I think that's super important. By the way, that doesn't need to be an expert. It's more about the relationship between those two. That there is like a symbiotic relationship between those two. That is everything. I think that's the pattern that I see mostly. Successful companies, they have somebody who's really in the weeds and somebody who's coming from the side and helping them. It can be an investor, can be a board member, can be a friend. Sometimes it's co-founders, but that's the pattern that you want to see. I don't think that people like completely alone will be successful. Barely, or rarely.
So a lot of ideas you mentioned which resonate a lot. The first one that really came up is this proven better way of doing things, at least in product world. If I remember Jamie, the AI meeting note-taking startup I did as my first proper company, it was a proven idea. There were no takers out there, Otter, etc., some established players. But we took one bit, which was actually a good idea, to not have a bot join a call, and this was a differentiation. But it was a proven idea in general. And I think before that we were actually launching 3 products which didn't work. And that's where partially we made the mistake of just thinking we're so visionary, so innovative, we have such a great idea, it's so compelling, it's so unique. And I also understand why founders fall into this trap, because if you share an idea which seems to be proven, already exists in some form, it's always, oh, there's competition. Isn't this company already doing it? It's sort of the common reaction that you get from society or from your parents or from friends, right? But competition in that sense is actually very good because it reduces the market risk you take on as a founder in the venture that you're going on. So this resonated a lot as the principle to kind of really take.
I love that. First of all, it's great to have competitors because, you know, it's inspiring. It means there's more people believing in that. And then also the other thing that you always hear is like, no, I can't talk about my idea. You know, then everybody will copy it. I've always been talking about all my ideas. Nobody ever copied it. Actually, it happened once, but it wasn't successful. So, you know, just, you know, go out, talk about it, be confident about it. There's no reason to hold back. So I think that's a pattern. Timing, complicated pattern, right? Because it's really, really hard to see before. Close relationship between like someone from the outside and someone inside. For me, that's like 100%. Like all of my companies had some form of that. And then there is one more thing, which we talked about this before, which we talked about as the X factor, that thing that makes a founder great. I'll give you an example. I worked with a young founder once, and our company was very, very small, and we were super busy, and then we get an acquisition offer. We're like, why? That early. It didn't happen. But we were so busy with our core business, and we had no money. And then suddenly we get this one guy who applies to us. He's like a former Goldman Sachs guy, comes from M&A. We're like, perfect, we need the guy, because we have no idea what's happening to us. And the guy comes, and in the interview with the CEO, he's like very nervous, and he's like, I don't know if I'm going to do this, right? You know, it's kind of a step back, take an internship. I want to go into startup world, but I had this good job at Goldman. And so the CEO says, you know what? This is a 3-month internship. I'm going to pay you all of your salary today, just to come in. If you don't like it, just leave again. But I'm going to pay you the 3-month salary today. And the guy was like, what do I have to do? And he's like, you have to sign now. And the guy signed. It was the best decision. Super risky, but in that moment, for that company, it was very important to have someone like him. We only had one choice. We wouldn't have, there's not many Goldman Sachs guys walking around with M&A experience who want to join a startup that has no money. And so the guy basically put everything on one card. It was the right decision. And those are the moments where like, that guy has something that the others don't have. It's a very smart decision in that moment to take that, you know, to put all of the chips on the table and gamble it, because he had a very good feeling, and he also knew that he had to have this guy. So that's just like a little bit of an idea about what I believe another pattern is. If you see people who can take such decisions in such a short time and be very precise about it, I would be always very, very interested in investing or working with these people.
So I guess let's just do a small break here together with the team.
Let's eat something. So when can I test your service, your software?
I don't want to give you a version that still is shitty.
I want to have the version when it's still shitty.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We started the video, you talked a bit about the combination of your unique interest, which is a lot in creativity and filmmaking and music, with entrepreneurship, and that a lot of companies you saw and founders that you saw succeed and win really had this unique combination of things you actually shouldn't combine, maybe, if you look at it from the first look. Like, how does this connection, again, relate to you, to the success of founders and what founders should do and what you would advise young people to do?
I'm always surprised like how many people have this classical profile of being an entrepreneur, basically, like, you know, business school, McKinsey, Goldman people, because I do believe that a lot of companies do really well when they have a competency as well on the CEO level that combines multiple things. And especially in the consumer industry, which I've mostly been in, you want to have people who have a feel for the product and who have a feel for the communication around it, who have ideas and like strong opinions, like an artist would have around what they want to achieve. And so that has served me really well. I mean, there's a lot, if I look back in my career, like from filmmaking to social networks to video games to basically like a lot of social media that I've been doing and the brands that I've been starting, a lot of this was around storytelling. A lot of it was around design. And I often felt like I'm the only one who kind of combines those both things, right? Some business competency and then also some idea about how the world should look like, or how a product should feel like, what it should do to you, the psychology behind that. I believe that's a nice thing, and I think it's a very, very unique thing, and that's why I think we see a lot of entrepreneurs who have both of that.
How does this connect to, let's say, product creation also in the earliest stages? I mean, scaling a company from the first 10, 20, 30K in monthly revenue to, you know, larger numbers. Yeah. It's one thing, but most people actually fail at the very first step of even identifying what is something people want. So how do you connect the dots there?
I think one thing is that artists or creative people really enjoy taking that leap and are not too afraid, because all creative process is in the end to some extent like iterative, but on the other side it's a lot of conviction. You have an idea about what you want to do. You have an idea about the color that you want to use, right? You have an idea about the sound that you want to create. So there's something in there, and that's why I don't really believe in companies like the lean startup way. I love the book, I love the guy, I love the philosophy behind it, but it has never served me well. I come from a place where I have conviction. I look at something and I'm like, I want this to be there. I think it's a good business. And a lot of things you can actually see before. You know that they will happen. You don't really know when they will happen. That's why timing is so hard. But you know that they have to be there. You know that they will be there. I had a company, doctor's appointments, basically, online. Everybody knew that doctor's appointments have to move online. It still hasn't happened completely. Is it a good thing? Is it important? Yes. Is it an interesting business? Yes. Is there a lot of money in that field? Yes, for sure. I had a lot of conviction from the beginning on that this needs to be there, and that translates to all the other businesses as well. When you're looking at, for example, Giant, my AI health company that I had, it was about basically replacing primary care doctors, because all these people do is they ask you a couple of good questions, and after that they're probably 90% there. Before they even touch you, they 90% know what you have. And I was like, well, we probably don't even need the human for that. We probably can do that through an algorithm, which is true. And it was very easy to see that it's true. The question was, were we a little bit too early? Why is it happening now? Why are the companies now that are raising money now raising actually more than we were able to raise? All of these things. But I was very convinced that this is important and that this is necessary.
As we connect this also to another point I was still very curious about is the, let's say, exit world and how to sell a company. You've been part in at least 15 processes where you were directly a founding member or, you know, first investor. What were like some crazy stories and moments you experienced in these exit processes that you witnessed? And also, how do you even sell a company? You know, how does this happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of become like a core skill of mine now, because there's a few people who went through so many exits. One thing is that I always say every deal is going to be off at least once. They're always off at some point. There's always like this negotiation, and you have to kind of be aware that it's going to be off at some point. Something's going to happen, some shit is going to hit the fan, and it's going to be off. And then if you're good, it's going to come back. That's one thing that you really have to remember. Another thing that I really always, that's by the way the thing that I say literally every second day. In some context, my favorite quote, if you've never missed a flight, you spend too much time at the airport. Meaning, if you never pushed as hard as you could, so that you actually lose the deal, that you basically lose the flight, that you go too far, you never know how far you can push. So you got to make that experience and negotiate so hard that probably the deal is off the table for a while. And you probably can still recover it. So in these negotiation processes, you got to be aware that both sides are going to be willing to push pretty far, and you got to show for it once what your limits are, then also figure out what the other side's limits are. And it's a pretty rough process in most cases, especially towards the end of it. It's very rare, I think, that everybody's just like, positive all through the process. So it's a tough one, and it's important again there to have someone who co-pilots you through it. There's very good M&A advisors, and I've worked with one particularly who has a great skill, which basically is to at some point say, you know what, guys, let's just go grab coffee. Everyone's like, well, really? Okay. And then you just leave, everybody comes back, is a little bit more settled, then continues. And he moderated that. That's an important part. Exit, people are often asking, like, who do you best sell to? Do you sell to another investor? Do you sell to a strategic? I've had many examples where afterwards the companies fell apart. And I think it's normal, unfortunately. A lot of large companies acquire companies and don't really know how to handle them afterwards. So selling a company is really risky for your company. But this world is really, really rough, and I think you do well to kind of keep your guard up in these conversations. Because you asked what is the craziest story that you've ever had, it's like my story is that I sold a company to a private equity firm, and I was the chairman of the board until the sale, and then I stepped down and they took over that position, and there was a guy, and in the first or second meeting in a group of like 8 people, I was complaining because he had a new marketing agency that he wanted to bring on, which is, a normal issue. And then he turns to me and says, Pascal, I'm a 62-year-old man with a very long step away from my project. And I thought, did this just happen? I was hoping that there's at least like an apology coming up, but there was silence. And there was the board mostly present, women, men, and I knew that that's it. You can't do business with people who tolerate such behavior. It will never come together. And that is the moment when sometimes, you realize that when you sell your company, you sell it. It's not yours anymore. You have to let it go. So that was the craziest story for sure.
Cool. What was actually your largest exit you ever did?
So the largest was 375 million. So out of the 15 companies that I started, we sold 9. 2 were like $5 million exits, and there was a 300 million and a 375, and the rest was in the middle.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Any last words you would like to share with, young entrepreneurs who want to build?
Yeah. Be convinced of what you do. Love what you do, and find something that you're really excited about, and don't let anybody distract you from it. Don't let nobody distract you from your idea. Your idea will be good, and it will be there. I think conviction can get you across all obstacles in life. And find someone that you look up to and that has a genuine interest in you as a person, to help you grow yourself and to help your company grow. And by the way, that's not a board member that you meet every 6 weeks, right? That's somebody who wants to spend an hour with you every day. Find that symbiotic relationship. For me, that is what makes the biggest difference between successful and unsuccessful companies.
Word.
Word.
Thank you so much for the time today.
Sure.
Great pleasure to be out here, shoot together. Now we head back. Man, it was epic. I hope there was something useful for everyone watching as well. Alright guys, and that is it. A full episode with Pascal Zuta. We learned a lot about how he builds companies. We hope you enjoyed it. We're working really hard to produce these episodes really well. And below we have everything linked about him. We would love to welcome you back for the next episode in the next week. We're dropping these every week, so make sure to hit subscribe if you made it to this part in the video. Thank you so much. See you next time.